Chapter 31, First Calibration. The lights brightened gradually, simulating dawn. Bash groaned before his eyes even opened. Every muscle felt like it had been unspooled, twisted, and rewound too tightly. Morning, he muttered inwardly. Technically, SE replied. Her tone carried the same calm precision as always, but something about it felt strained. You are awake earlier than scheduled. That may be why your readings are inconsistent. He sat up slowly, wincing as the motion pulled through his shoulders. Inconsistent how? I still can't monitor your body correctly, she admitted. Last night should have re-established full synchronization, neural reset, regenerative calibration, standard biofeedback channels. None of it took. The disconnect remains. He rubbed the back of his neck. Meaning I can't read you, she said quietly. Not the way I should. I can sense your cognitive load, your emotional state, your mental output, but I can't quantify your physical condition. No temperature, no fatigue index, no strength or energy reserves. Only estimates. Bash frowned. And that's a problem. It will be, SC said. As you evolve, the margin of error will grow. I was designed to regulate your performance thresholds. Without accurate readings, I can only project outcomes based on past data. The longer this continues, the less I can assist you. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, testing his balance. The floor was cold against his bare feet, but the motion steadied him. Don't worry about it for now, he said. If I can't rely on you to tell me my limits, then I'll Ave to learn them myself. There was a small pause, and when Essie spoke again, her voice carried something close to uncertainty. You would rather rely on pain? Pain's honest, he said simply, and right now, that's enough. Then I'll prioritize the other task. What task? Figuring out how to keep the Nexus from resetting me during deep synchronization. He smiled faintly despite the ache in his neck. Good. We're finally in agreement. It seems we are. Across the room, Nyra still sat cross-legged on her bunk, her posture identical to how it had been when Bash fell asleep. He was about to say something when her eyes opened suddenly. For a fraction of a second, there was confusion, like a machine resuming from a paused state and realizing time had passed without permission. She blinked, glanced around the room, then stood with deliberate movements. The stiffness in her limbs was obvious, not pain, just inexperience. Every motion carried that hesitant care of someone still learning what their body could do. Rixor groaned from the lower bunk, rubbing at his face. I slept like the dead. Please tell me I overslept and missed training. Bash stretched with a quiet wince. Nope, still alive. But if you're that eager to miss training, I'm sure Murdoch would be happy to help you join the dead. Rixor let out a tired laugh. Yeah, I'll take my chances with Jouk instead. The three dressed in silence, the gray training suits fitting like a second skin. When they stepped into the corridor, the lights adjusted automatically, shifting to a soft white that guided them forward. The hum of other Sparters filled the hall, rows of figures moving with purpose, some fluid, others mechanical. The coordination facility loomed ahead, its walls alive with faint luminescent lines that pulsed like veins. Inside, the air carried a sterile chill. Hologrids stretched across the floor, marking dozens of circular training zones. Trainers, mostly browns and grays, moved among the groups, adjusting stances, offering guidance, and monitoring performance. Their role wasn't command yet, just preparation, ensuring every Spartan could function before the true cycle began. Gross motor calibration, SC noted. Today's focus, balance, reach, lift, and controlled momentum. Sounds like gym class, Bash muttered. Based on your memories, you lacked enthusiasm for that too, SC replied. He paused mid-step. Wait days to refine instinct into efficiency. The comparison wasn't lost on her. After the fifth failed reset, she froze in place, fist clenched. Bash deactivated his grid and walked over. You're overcorrecting, he said quietly. I am following the pattern, she replied, voice clipped. Too closely. You're trying to mimic the others instead of feeling it yourself. Her brow furrowed slightly. Feeling it? He nodded. Stop thinking about the markers. Focus on what your body's doing between them, where your weight shifts, how the momentum carries you. You're not a program, you're movement. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then she exhaled, slow and deliberate, and reset the exercise. Her next rotation was smoother, more fluid. By the third repetition, she wasn't fighting the motion anymore. When she finished, she looked at him, not quite smiling, but less rigid. Acceptable, she said. I'll take that as a thank you. You shouldn't. He grinned. I will anyway. They worked for half the day on gross motor calibration before transitioning to fine motor control. Here, the tasks required precision, balancing light spheres on pressure-sensitive panels, tracing invisible lines in the air, manipulating force with exact grip tension. Bash's earlier rhythm faltered. The subtlety of the motions demanded patience he hadn't yet developed. Nyra, however, seemed to thrive. Her hands moved with delicate accuracy, her frustration giving way to concentration. Rixor remained behind, repeating the same drills with stubborn focus. He didn't complain. And now, just ground through each failure until he achieved the minimal passing score. By the end of the session, the entire group moved with visible improvement. Movements flowed smoother, timing sharper, breath steadier as the system logged each adjustment and response. Bash wiped his hands on his suit, catching his reflection in the transparent wall panel. The face that stared back felt familiar, but the posture didn't. Stronger, straighter, less human. As they began filing toward the exit, something in the far corner caught his attention. A separate chamber, half obscured by reflective glass, pulsed with faint blue light. Inside were nexus circles, concentric rings etched into the floor, each surrounded by floating holoscreens and suspended halo projectors. Figures inside moved, in perfect synchronization, their motions mirrored by glowing avatars that fought, blocked, and countered with impossible speed. "What's that?" he asked. "Virtual sparring chamber," SE answered. The nexus circles allow Sparters to simulate combat using their own neural feedback. It replicates the sensation of using abilities without expending actual energy. Bash stared at the figures within the circles, their movements blurred between flesh and light. "So this is where we'll learn to fight for real. Eventually," SE said. "Once you meet the performance thresholds, you'll graduate to the practical field. The circles are training for the body. The field tests the mind." He nodded slowly. "Good to know." They were preparing to head toward the cafeteria when the facility doors opened again. Commander Jouk stepped through, his presence cutting through the ambient noise like a blade. A figure followed behind him, a brown Spartan, tall and broad-shouldered, her movements deliberate but unpolished. "Number 100, Jouk announced, motioning the newcomer forward. His gaze swept once over Bash, Rixor, and Nyra before turning toward the rest of the facility. "My memories." "What exactly can you see?" "Everything," she said without hesitation. "Your memories form part of my data archive. I have conducted a complete analysis. Education, experiences, relationships, decisions, failures. All of it." The words hit harder than he expected. "So you've seen everything I've ever done?" "Yes." He swallowed, jaw tightening. "And you didn't think to mention that sooner?" "You did not ask," she said evenly, then softened. "It was not curiosity. Bash, you and I are linked until one of us ceases to function. To protect you, I need to understand you. Every reaction, every choice. What you've done tells me what you're capable of. It may matter later." He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Still feels like you broke into my head and rearranged the furniture." "Then I will try not to move anything else," she said quietly. He couldn't help but smile despite himself. "Appreciate it." He almost laughed. "You really are learning sarcasm." "I learn what you repeat." Bash stepped into his assigned zone. Polo markers appeared at different points across the grid, flashing in rhythm. The task was simple: step, turn, lift, pivot. Yet everything about it demanded absolute precision. Any misalignment uttered a faint vibration through the floor and reset the sequence. He caught on quickly. The muscle memory from his earlier fight with Murdoch seemed to carry over. Every shift of weight, every counterbalance, came faster than expected. Rixor, 2 zones over, wasn't faring as well. He was already sweating after the first rotation, muttering under his breath. "Why does this feel harder than it looks?" Bash smiled. "Because it's supposed to." Rixor puffed out a breath. "Perfect. My favorite kind of suffering. Intentional." Nyra, however, was struggling the most. Her movements were sharp but uncoordinated, mechanical in the wrong ways. Each correction seemed to frustrate her further, her jaw tightening with every failed repetition. Other Spartans nearby, those with lower numbers, moved smoothly through the exercises. They'd had more time to adjust to their bodies, more. His voice carried easily through the open hall. "All Novarchs, hear this. With 100 now registered, the initiation phase is complete. Tomorrow, the actual cycle begins. Prepare yourselves accordingly." The room went still for a heartbeat, then activity resumed, muted, focused, charged with new tension. His eyes lingered for a moment longer, unreadable. Then he turned and left without another word. The brown remained. She studied them for a second, then offered a small nod. "Guess that makes 4. Rixor smirked. "And just when I thought things were getting quiet." Bash extended a hand. "Welcome to the chaos." She shook it once, firm grip, expression calm. "Designation 100, she said. T.I. was given a name, Taren. "Nyra," the blue said, voice level. "Rixor." Bash. Taren leaned forward slightly, studying them. "Was it really that bad?" Rixor let out a humorless chuckle. You'll see tomorrow. Bash gave her a tired grin. Welcome, just in time for the fun part. Nyra, standing off to the side, flexed her hands as if still testing her grip. If struggling with what you thought would be simple counts as bad, she said evenly, then yes, it's that bad. Rixor groaned. Perfect. The optimist speaks. Nyra didn't look at him. I'm realistic. You should try it. The group fell quiet, the sound of distant drills echoing through the vast hall, a reminder that the real training hadn't even begun. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments if you would like a better understanding of Bash's origin and family. Check out my book Before the Genesis. It tells the story of Kyle and Abby and has some lead up right into this novel. Rundock Chapter 32. The quiet before motion, the echo of drills still thudded through the metal floors when the quartet stepped out of the coordination facility. The air beyond felt heavier, charged by silence rather than sound. Rixor rolled his shoulders, muttering something that might have been a prayer or a complaint. They followed the corridor lights toward the cafeteria. Everything in the ship seemed to vibrate on the same low frequency. Machinery, footsteps, breath. The rhythm sank into them until words felt unnecessary. Tomorrow, Rixor said finally, I'm betting Will wish today came back. Nyra didn't look at him. Tomorrow's the point of all this. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. Bash smirked faintly but didn't reply. His muscles still ached from the day's drills. Even breathing felt mechanical now, and out, measured, logged. The cafeteria's doors slid open with their usual hiss. Inside, the space buzzed with the tired energy focus on precision. Bash shook his head slightly, then repeated aloud, nothing solid. Probably fine motor training, smaller movements, more high focus, control work. Nyra added, plus whatever personal instruction Jouk thinks we need. Rixor stabbed at his protein square. Translation, mental suffering and smaller motions. Taren's mouth curved slightly. Precise suffering. Then, SC's voice brushed across Bash's mind. There are no accessible records for Jouk's training methods. He alters his approach every cycle. Bash didn't bother hiding his annoyance. So no predictions. None reliable, she said, but expectation of discomfort remains statistically sound. He almost laughed aloud. Even she's betting on paying, he muttered. Nyra glanced over. No one helpful, he said quickly. Rixor raised an eyebrow but let it go, too tired to chase the mystery. For a moment, the conversation lapsed into the steady rhythm of utensils scraping trot. Wise, the room's lighting dimmed slightly, the artificial dusk cycle approaching. Then the cafeteria doors on the far wall hissed open again, a sharper sound this time. 15 figures stepped through, their uniforms carrying the faint blue-white trim that marked them as Reincarnates. The atmosphere changed instantly. Voices dropped, motion slowed. The Reincarnates didn't search the room. They knew where to look. Every one of them turned toward Bash. The weight of their stare pressed across the space like static before a storm. Taren noticed first. I'm guessing that's not admiration. Rixor sighed. Long story. Nyra gave a quiet hum that wasn't quite laughter. Bash kept his focus on the tray in front of him. They're not fans, just holding a grudge. Taren leaned in slightly. What ha? Peepant? Rixor set down his fork, gesturing vaguely with tired fingers. First day. They dumped food all over me. The low murmur of 100 voices too worn to rise above background noise. The smell of nutrient, steam, and metal trays clung to the air. They moved through the line, each tray identical. Gray protein squares, hydration cubes, faintly glowing supplement vials. When they sat, Taren studied the arrangement of food like it might reveal a pattern. Any idea what he's planning tomorrow? She asked. Fine motor coordination, SC said quietly in his head. Smaller movements. Classic greeting, apparently. Council loves chaos. Jouk didn't stop it. We had to settle it in the arena. 2 duels, Bash said softly. It was that or watch it keep happening. Taren studied him. Expressi, on unreadable. What were the results? Bash hesitated before answering. One unconscious. One had to go to the med bay. Rixor gave a humorless chuckle. Understatement of the cycle. Taren's gaze flicked between them, eyes widening slightly. For a second, she seemed to be reevaluating both of them, like maybe they'd fought together, not just Bash alone. Rixor caught the look and leaned back, palms raised. Don't let that face fool you. I didn't throw a single punch. Just stood there looking like a target. Bash smirked faintly but said nothing, focusing back on his tray. Rixor leaned back, shaking his head. Bash took both, and won decisively. Didn't even give them time to blink. Bash didn't respond, just kept eating. Across the room, The Reincarnates broke into smaller groups. B. I kept throwing sharp, deliberate glances their way, open hostility wrapped in the thin veneer of restraint. It wasn't over. Not for them. Nyra finally spoke, tone measured. They'll test boundaries again. That's what they do. They want to know how far they can go before the Nexus steps in. Taren looked from her to Bash. And will you let them? Bash shook his head once. I'll avoid it if I can. But if they push, he let the thought trail off, the meaning obvious. They'll figure it out the same way as before. That ended the conversation. The quartet finished eating in silence while the Reincarnates whispered among themselves, their laughter brutal and cold. When the quartet rose to leave, no one blocked their path. Just those same looks, daggers without motion. The corridor back to the dorm was quieter. Rixor exhaled slowly. Feels like they are planning something. Nyra's voice stayed even. They are not used to losing. It'll pass. Vash wasn't convinced, but he didn't argue. The tension from the cafeteria still clung to him like static. Every step toward the dorm felt heavier, not from fatigue but from the quiet awareness that things had shifted, lines drawn without a single word. When they reached their quarters, the hatch opened with a low hiss. The light softened automatically, fading from clinical white to a warm, artificial dusk. The shift should have been comforting, but it only made the silence thicker. Taren moved first, unfastening the collar of her training suit and setting her ID band on the bunk's edge. If they are still staring tomorrow, she said, ignore it. Feels like the kind of place that keeps score for everything. Rixor muttered, yeah, I'll try to remember that when one of them decides to test their luck. He flopped onto his bunk and exhaled sharply. Feels like I've been awake for a week. Nyra didn't respond. She was already seated on her bed, straight-backed, hands resting on her knees, her gaze fixed on the far wall. She hadn't said much since they'd left the cafeteria, but there was a tension in her posture that wasn't fatigue. Bash sat down last, elbows on his knees. For a few seconds he just listened, to the hum of the circulation vents, to Rixor's uneven breathing, to the faint vibration of the ship underfoot. Something was missing. You've been relatively quiet. He thought toward the silence in his head. A beat later, SC's voice surfaced, low and composed, running calculations. I am modeling possible outcomes of our next Nexus synchronization. Bash frowned slightly. That's why you've been silent all day? Yes. I was evaluating countermeasures, how to avoid deep neural intrusion. We passed registration, but if a full scan occurs, my partition could be exposed. I need to be ready. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. You sound more worried than usual. Not worried. Focused. A pause. If they perform a deeper audit, I may need to alter your neural signatures temporarily. It will feel strange. Great, he murmured aloud before catching himself. Rixor cracked one eye open. You good? Yeah, Bash said quickly. Just thinking. Dangerous hobby, Rixor mumbled, rolling over. Get some rest. SC, whisper. I'll keep working while you sleep. Don't burn out. He thought back. Impossible, she said. I'm you, remember? When the lights rose the next morning, they came up soft, a slow gradient from deep amber to bright white. Bash blinked against it, momentarily forgetting where he was. For the first time since waking in this place, his mind felt clear. The dull ache in his muscles had faded to something manageable, and his thoughts moved without friction. Across the room, Rixor was already stretching, jaw cracking with a yawn. Weird, he muttered. Think that's the first time I've actually slept well. Nyra was standing by her bunk, tightening the wrist seals on her training suit. You did, she said flatly. You snored for half a period. Rixor squinted. You timed it. She didn't. T answer, which only made him groan louder. Taren was already dressed, smoothing the sleeves of her suit with quiet precision. At least we'll start rested, she said. Whatever that's worth. Rested, SC noted in Bash's mind. Body calibration nominal. Neural stability optimal. Bash stretched his arms above his head. You sound almost proud. I prefer functional. Pride is irrelevant to efficiency. He smirked. You say that, but you sound pleased. Statistically accurate systems are satisfying to maintain, she replied, and he could almost hear the faintest hint of amusement behind the monotone voice. They left the dorm together, their steps sinking unconsciously as they entered the corridor. The hum of the ship seemed sharper in the morning, clean, rhythmic, alive. Other Spartans joined the flow, one stream merging with another until the hallways carried them all toward the same place. When they entered the coordination facility, Bash noticed immediately that it had changed. The room seemed larger now, or maybe emptier. The hologrids had been reconfigured into 100 precise training stations, each a circle of faint blue light embedded in the floor. Floating monitors hovered above every zone, displaying a glowing numeric ID, each corresponding to one of the Novarchs. Jouk stood on the elevated platform at the far end of the hall, arms folded behind his back. His presence alone silenced the ambient noise. Coordination Phase 1. His tone was calm, clinical. You will engage in a series of 15 fine motor sequences. Movements will be repeated until neural respo and SE aligns with output. Perfection is the baseline. Rixor leaned toward Bash, whispering, "He says that like it's easy." "Maybe it is," Bash murmured back. For him, the floor under their feet brightened. Holo rings rose to waist level, forming their first task, narrow circles spinning at varying speeds. Again, they moved. At first, it was simple, shifting balance, reaching between rings, catching small pulses of light before they disappeared. But the rhythm quickened. Each success shortened the timer. Each mistake triggered a reset. SC's voice guided Bash quietly. "Steady your left wrist. You're overcompensating." "Got it," he thought, adjusting. The ring's pulse stabilized, turning green. All around him, Sparters worked in near silence. The only sounds were movement, breath, and th. He faint hum of the whole systems. Even Rixor had stopped muttering, locked in concentration. Nyra was 2 stations away, every motion sharp, exact. Taren was slower, more deliberate, calculating each reach before committing. After what felt like an hour, the sequence shifted. The lights in the rings dimmed, and new patterns appeared in the air above them, small floating points of light. Spot response, Jouk's voice echoed. "React immediately. Miss points will be logged." The facility went dark. Bash's vision adjusted just in time for the first flash. Bright white, upper left. He reached and hit it cleanly. Another, lower right, then 3 in succession. His muscles responded faster than he expected, rhythm syncing with SC's cues. "You're adapting," she noted. "Neural latency decreasing." NG. He barely had time to answer before a wave of flashes came in rapid sequence. Across the hall, several Sparters missed their marks, the monitors above their heads flickering yellow. Rixor swore quietly, smacking a pulse too late. "Who designed this nightmare?" "Jouk," SC replied dryly in Bash's mind. Bash almost laughed despite himself. "Figures." The test cycled again, faster. Bash's pulse stayed steady, but fatigue began to creep in, mental, not physical. Each round demanded sharper reaction, more control. Every Sparter in the room began to slow. When the lights returned, they were all breathing harder. Even the air felt heavier, saturated with data and sweat. Jouk gave no praise, no pause. Sequence 2, drone control. Tiny silver drones lifted from each platform, forming hovering spheres in front of them. Controls appeared at their wrists, sensitive rings that tracked the smallest motion of each finger. Bash exhaled slowly. "SE, what is this?" "Reflex calibration through external mapping," she said. "Any deviation in motion results in destabilization." "Meaning, don't twitch." He smiled faintly. "Great." The drone shimmered into motion, rising until they hovered level with each Sparter's chest. Then blue tracers linked every unit to the controller rings at their wrists. One breath later, the tracers vanished. "Begin," Jouk commanded. Bash flexed his fingers. The drone responded instantly, drifting left with the motion of a thought. Another shift, forward, back, up. The controls were delicate, almost absurdly so. A heartbeat too strong and the drone spun out of alignment, and wobbling until the field corrected it with a harsh static buzz. Across the room, faint crashes sounded as drones collided with invisible boundaries and dissolved into pixels before reforming. Rixor's was one of them. "Fantastic," he muttered. "I'm allergic to success." "Micro adjust your index angle," SE advised. "You're compensating unevenly." Bash exhaled, forcing calm. "Better? Stable?" He focused again. The drone moved as though tethered to his eyes instead of his hands. The motion became smoother. Then the difficulty increased. The drone split into 2. Jouk's voice carried over the hall. "Dual field control. Maintain symmetry." A ripple of frustration swept the room. Rixor's second drone crashed immediately. Nyra managed to keep both balanced for a few seconds before one darted upward, striking the ceiling. Taren, slower but steadier, compensated with small, deliberate twitches. Bash lasted longer, until his focus fractured between 2 points. One drone clipped the other and the system reset with a sharp tone. "Neural partition failure," SC murmured. "Your attention split unevenly." "You think?" He shot back, rubbing his temples. The lights dimmed, sequence complete. A brief pause, barely long enough to breathe. Then the floor plates shifted again. Sequence 3, core alignment. Cylindrical columns rose around each platform, glowing rings circling them from knee to chest height. The rings rotated at varying speeds, intersecting in unpredictable patterns. "Hold position," Jouk ordered. "Contact results and reset." They stepped inside the columns. The moment Bash entered, a faint vibration ran through his body. He realized he was standing in an active magnetic field, Every slight movement disrupted balance. He spread his stance, shoulders tight. The rings drifted closer centimeters from his skin. Rixor cursed softly. This feels like punishment. Everything here is, Bash muttered. Minutes dragged. Sweat gathered along his jaw despite the facility's cool air. One of the rings brushed his elbow. Instant flash of red. Sequence reset. He started again. Nyra moved like a machine, controlling every breath. Taren's eyes were closed, body perfectly centered. Rixor looked like he was wrestling gravity itself. The field finally powered down. The silence that followed felt heavier than the exercise. Jouk didn't look up from his console. Sequence 4. Mach. Mule precision. Thin rods extended from the platform, each topped with a hovering orb of light. They flickered between colors: white, blue, green, red. A tone accompanied each hue. Strike the correct sequence. Errors will be logged. Pattern recognition under fatigue. SC said. Cognitive layering. Bash reached out. White, blue, green, red. The sequence shifted mid-motion. White are red, blue, green. Faster each time. By the fifth repetition, his timing slipped. The process repeated 4 sequences, then reset, then again. Each drilled blood into the next until time itself felt abstract. They cycled through drone control, core alignment, spot response, precision strike, over and over. By the 4th full cycle, reaction scores began to drop. Bash could see it in the glowing numbers above each station, steady green turning to yellow, then orange. Hands trembled, shoulders sagged, the rune's collective rhythm faltered. Even Nyra's flawless coordination began to fracture, tiny errors accumulating until her display showed a flicker of red. Rixor's frustration broke into open muttering. If I make it through this without throwing up, I'm nominating myself for sainthood. Quiet, Jouk said without raising his voice. The single word froze him mid-breath. Bash swallowed the dryness in his throat. His drone sequence restarted, but his focus lagged by half a second. The sphere wobbled, struck the side field, disintegrated. Reset. Your neural delay has increased by 12%, SC said. No kidding. Partition focus. Ignore external input. Trying. He steadied his breathing. NTH. Rough the nose, out through the mouth. The drone steadied for a few seconds. Then the next wave of tasks began. Another spot response in near darkness. Flashes of light. Hundreds of them. Faster than thought. His arms ached from reaching, though they shouldn't have. The fatigue wasn't in muscle. It was behind his eyes, a slow burning ache radiating down his spine. Jouk's voice broke through again. Sequence 5, progressive integration. No explanation, just movement. Rings, drones, lights, all at once. Bash blinked. He's combining them, apparently. Begin. The world became chaos. Drones darted between moving rings. Lights flashed. Tones overlapped. It was impossible to track everything. He caught maybe half, missed the rest. His display turned orange, then red. One more round and it reset to neutral, mercifully blank. They started again, and again, and again. By the 4th cycle through the 15 sequences, even Jouk's impassive tone sounded distant. The hall filled with muted gasps and the soft thud of mistakes. The glowing scoreboards above each sparter flickered, green fading to yellow, yellow to red. Rixor's drone spun out of control and crashed spectacularly into the wall of his station. He didn't even curse this time, just stared, lips parted, sweat dripping down his neck. Nyra slammed her fist once against her platform, immediately resetting her field. The motion was uncharacteristic, almost human. Taren's steady pace slowed to a crawl, her precision fracturing as her focus blurred. By the 7th repetition, Bash's arms felt like lead. His response, lagged, not from pain but from sheer cognitive fatigue. Every command had to push through fog. He could sense SC adjusting in the background, trying to filter sensory input. You're burning out, she warned. No, just slower. Your neural efficiency has dropped to 62%. Feels like worse. Do not stop. Data retention improves with repetition. He wanted to laugh at that, but didn't have the strength. The next sequence began automatically, lights and tones merging into a blur. Time fractured completely. The repetitions blended into one long, endless test. By the 10th and final pass, no one in the hall looked remotely composed. Breathing ragged, posture slack. Drones crashed and failed to reform. The rune's synchronized rhythm disintegrated. Monitors flashed crimson. Jouk watched, Ched without expression. Bash's own field reset twice before he even realized he'd missed. SC's voice thinned to a whisper. Neural patterns degrading. You've exceeded safe thresholds. And Jouk, observing, the last sequence ended in silence. Jouk finally stepped forward, hands clasped behind him. His gaze swept across the hall. 100 Sparters bent, trembling, blinking against exhaustion. Coordination phase 1 complete, he said. Metrics recorded. Deviation curves logged. No praise. No acknowledgement. Only cold data. Tomorrow, he continued, we push harder. Then he turned and left. No one spoke for several seconds. The only sound was the slow collective rhythm of breathing. Bash stared at the fading blue glow of his station. The numbers above his ID pulsed once, then vanished. Your score dropped 23%. SE said softly, still among the highest. Doesn't feel like it. Fatigue is temporary. Data remains. He rubbed his face with both hands and looked toward the exit. Cafeteria, he asked hoarsely. Rixor nodded. If I can remember how to walk. Taren didn't answer, just fell into step beside them as they left the hall. The corridor was quiet again, the hum of the ship wrapping around them like a pulse. Behind them, the coordination facility powered down one by one, the training stations fading to darkness, waiting for tomorrow. The walk to the cafeteria felt longer than it should have. No one rushed. No one spoke. 100 Sparters filed through the corridors in silence, the rhythmic hum of the ship serving as the only sound. The air itself emitted heavier, thick with the residue of spent focus. When Bash and the others entered the mess hall, the usual low chatter was gone. The line moved mechanically. Trays slid forward. Hands moved automatically to fill them. The nutrient blocks and liquid supplements looked the same as ever, but even the smell felt muted. Rixor sat first, dropping onto the bench with a groan. I think my brain's bruised, he muttered. Nyra didn't respond, eyes unfocused as she ate. Taren sat across from them, posture straight but distant, her tray untouched. Bash forced himself to take a bite. It tasted like nothing, texture without meaning. He swallowed anyway, then rested his elbows on the table, letting his head fall forward. You're quiet, he thought. SC's voice came after a pause, soft but edged wit. Age fatigue of her own, processing delays, observation data incomplete. You sound almost tired, he teased, though his mental tone lacked conviction. Not tired, she corrected. Limited. I cannot sense your physical state. Without full feedback, I'm relying on visual and behavioral data. Crude estimations. You're doing fine, he said. I am not, she replied simply. I'm designed to monitor and correct neural physical coordination in real time. If I can't read your vitals, I'm guessing. Bash rubbed his temples, feeling the dull ache settling behind his eyes. Then guess well. There was a pause, then something that almost sounded like a sigh through static. I will try. He didn't answer. The table around him blurred into quiet movement. Rixor pushed his tray away halfway through eating, muttering, I can't even taste it anymore. Nyra gave a short nod that might have been agreement. None of them looked up. When they finally rose, it was without ceremony. Plates clattered softly back onto the conveyor, footsteps echoing dully through the corridor as they returned to the dorm sector. Inside, the lights were dim, tinted amber for rest. No one spoke. Rixor collapsed onto his bunk immediately. Nyra sat for a long time on the edge of hers, staring at her hands as though willing them to stop trembling. Taren methodically folded her uniform and set it aside before lying down, eyes already closing. Bash lingered a moment, watching the others, then climbed into his own bunk. The mattress accepted his weight like memory foam, soundless. You should rest, SC said quietly. That's the plan, he replied. Tomorrow will be different. He opened one eye. Better or worse? Another pause. Yes, he almost smiled at that. You're learning sarcasm. Observation of your habits, she replied. Unavoidable. Bash let his eyes close. The hum of the ship filled the silence, steady and distant, fading as exhaustion took hold. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments exclamation if you would like a better understanding of Bash's origin and family. Check out my book Before the Genesee. It tells the story of Kyle and Abby and has some lead up right into this novel. Run Doc, Chapter 33, Calibration through Strain. When the lights brightened that morning, they were sharper than before, sterile, almost surgical. Bash blinked against it, feeling the weight of the previous cycle still lingering behind his eyes. His body didn't ache the same way his mind had yesterday, but it felt heavy, like gravity had quietly increased overnight. Across the dorm, Rixor stretched, rolling his shoulders until they cracked. I'm guessing today's gonna be worse, he said. Nyra zipped the collar of her training suit, expression unreadable. Jouk doesn't seem like someone who repeats himself. Taren stood by the door, already ready. Then whatever's next, she said. We'd adapt. Rest level. Acceptable. SC noted in Bash's mind. Body calibration incomplete. Neural stability holding. That sounds optimistic. He thought back. Optimism is a poor metric, she replied evenly. He smirked faintly. Still sounds like you're trying. Her silence felt like agreement. They left together, following the growing stream of Spartans down the corridor. The air hummed faintly, that omnipresent ship resonance, but now there was a low undercurrent, a deeper pulse, as though the vessel itself was bracing for effort. When they entered the coordination facility, the change was immediate. On were the precise training rings and hologrids. In their place stretched a massive arena, bright and sprawling. The smooth floors had been replaced by textured surfaces, rubberized tracks looping around the perimeter, rows of heavy equipment gleaming beneath stark white lights. A track curved in concentric rings around the room, leading toward a cluster of weight platforms, hydraulic resistance machines, and cardio rigs. The air even smelled different, rubber mixed with heated alloy. Rixor whistled softly. So gym class. The murder edition. Seems so, Bash muttered. Jouk stood near the center, hands clasped behind him. His expression, as always, gave nothing away. Coordination phase 2, he said. His voice carried clearly through the space. Physical calibration. Yesterday, your minds were measured. Today, your bodies. No one responded. You will complete 10 sequential trials. Cardiovascular endurance, strength output, reflex stability, balance control. The sequence will repeat until thresholds are achieved. He paused, scanning the room. Minimum standard, completion of 3 full circuits without decline, fulfilling a minimal threshold. Rixor leaned toward Bash. Define minimal. Guess we'll find out, Bash said. Begin, Jouk ordered. A sharp tone rang through the arena. The floor lighting shifted, forming a pulsing red line that traced the length of the track. The standard pace. It glowed faintly ahead of them, moving at a precise, unchanging speed. Maintain alignment with the line. Jouk's voice carried over the speakers. Falling behind registers as inefficiency. The command was followed by another sharp tone. The line surged forward. Spartans broke into motion, falling into synchronized rhythm. 100 figures sprinting as the air filled with the suit. Indeed of pounding steps. Bash ran. At first, the pace felt manageable. The line glowed like a heartbeat, pulsing just behind of him, daring him to fall behind. His body found rhythm easily, each stride measured against that glowing mark. The track curved beneath him, synthetic grip biting into his soles. Increase stride length. Regulate breath at intervals of 5. Maintain forward posture, as he instructed quietly. You sound calm for someone being chased by a line. He thought back. The line is constant, she replied. You are the variable. He pushed harder, matching its speed. The red glow reflected faintly off his skin as the hum of synchronized footfalls echoed through the hall. Behind him, someone faltered. The line passed over them, and their ID tag blinked yellow. No one spoke. The suit, and the line's rhythmic pulse became everything, a heartbeat for the facility itself. Indifferent and absolute. The first circuit ended with barely any strain. The next began immediately. Transition, Jouk called. The track lighting dimmed. New markers flared over the resistance platforms. Sparta shifted positions, stepping into assigned zones. Hydraulic weights rose silently from the floor. Load set to 40% output, Jouk said. Lift until limit. Bash grasped the metal grips. The resistance felt strange, smooth, almost alive, increasing exponentially with motion. His muscles strained, arms trembling against invisible force. Beside him, Rixor grunted, face tight with effort. Nyra's movements were mechanical, perfect form despite the tension in her frame. Taren's breath in G stayed measured, but sweat already gathered at her brow. When the platform flashed blue, they transitioned again. Next, vertical climbs, then lateral balance beams, then weighted runs, then rotational throws with dense alloy spheres. 10 total exercises. No rest. By the end of the first circuit, the room pulsed with heat and sound, the rhythmic clang of weights, the pounding of feet, the sharp hiss of breath. Jouk gave no direction beyond the occasional continue. They started again. The second circuit felt heavier. Each movement took longer to execute. Bash's heartbeat pounded in his ears. Rixor's face flushed deep red as he stumbled off the track, caught himself, and forced back into motion. Heart rate unstable, as he said quietly, decrease output by 6%. Can't. He's still watching. So is everyone else. She hesitated. Your efficiency is dropping. So's everyone's. By the end of the second circuit, several Spartans had collapsed outright, kneeling on the floor, gasping. Jouk didn't react. He simply walked among them, eyes cold, silent. Continue, he said again. The third began. The track felt endless now. Ash's legs ached, every stride sending dull shock up through his spine. The weights felt heavier than before, though they weren't. just the loss of power compounding with every repetition. Rixor was no longer joking. His breaths came in broken bursts. I think my heart's trying to quit. Tell it to wait in line, Bash muttered, hoisting another weighted bar. Nyra's hands shook. Her once perfect precision fractured under fatigue. Taren's steady pace slow. Edda's survival rhythm, controlled but clearly on the edge. I'm mid-circuit. Their movements had degraded into sluggish automation. Fourth repetition. Jouk announced. Bash blinked. Fourth, he'd lost track entirely. Time felt circular. He couldn't remember when he'd last drawn a full breath. SE's voice flickered faintly. Neuromuscular sync deviation at 32%. English, please. You're falling apart. He gritted his teeth. Noted. Around him, Sparters began dropping out entirely. Not collapsing, but simply stopping. Their bodies refused to continue. Some leaned on equipment. Others sat motionless, eyes distant. Jouk didn't intervene. Fifth sequence, he said. Reduce speed, increase control, focus on stability under exhaustion. Even SC seemed surprised. He's not testing strength anymore, she murmured. He's testing surrender thresholds. Then I'll fail that test too. He pushed forward. Another set of climbs. Another sprint. Another throw. His motions blurred into instinct. Rhythm replacing thought. The fatigue reached a depth beyond pain. A flat, empty burn. By the seventh circuit, only a handful of Sparters were still upright. Rixor was among them, though barely. Nyra's arm shook uncontrollably with every lift. Bash's coordination faltered, his grip failing halfway through a pull. The bar slipped from his hands and crashed to the floor with a hollow clang. Stop, SC urged. Your thresholds are exceeded. He'd ignored her. Continue, Jouk said. Eighth, ninth, 10th. No one truly finished. The few still standing were shadows of form, staggering through the final track. When it ended, Jouk simply raised his hand. The lights dimmed to neutral. The air vents roared to life, pulling the heat from the room. Cycle 3 complete, he said. Metrics recorded. Tomorrow, he paused, letting the silence stretch. You will begin adaptive correction. Then he turned and walked away. No one moved for several seconds. Rixor leaned forward on his knees, gasping. I think he's trying to kill us. Taren didn't respond. She was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling. Nyra sat cross-legged beside a resistance bar, head bowed, breathing slow and steady, as though she were forcing herself to stay calm. Bash sank onto the floor, elbows resting on his knees. His body trembled from residual tension. You should not push beyond your limit again, SC said. You restarting to sound like you care. Efficiency loss concerns me. He chuckled dryly. Sure it does. There was a flicker of hesitation. I cannot feel your physical responses. Monitoring only mental fatigue is inefficient. You are too opaque. Opaque? Unreadable. My analysis is limited to what I can infer. I cannot calculate pain, endurance, or strain precisely. I am ineffective. You're doing fine, he said softly. I am not. He didn't have the energy to argue. Then we'll just both fake it. Silence. Then a faint hum of reluctant agreement. The cafeteria that evening was quieter than before. Even trays seemed heavier to lift. Most Sparters ate without tasting. The faint clatter of utensils was the only sound that dared fill the air. Rixor sat across from Bash, eyes half closed, chewing slowly. If he says Coordination Phase 3, I'm walking into the nearest airlock. Nyra didn't look up. You wouldn't make it that far. Taren's voice was barely a whisper. This is deliberate. He's breaking us down before building us back. Feels like the breaking part's going a little long, Rixor said. Bash said nothing. He wasn't sure his throat could form words. The taste of the nutrient paste turned to dust in his mouth, but he kept eating anyway. Habit more than hunger. SC was silent again until they rose to leave. You are deteriorating faster than projected, she said finally. You said that yesterday. Yesterday was theoretical. Today is measurable. He smirked faintly. Then tomorrow's gonna be fun. That is not the definition of fun. He didn't reply. The dorm was dim when they returned. Ned. Rixor dropped onto his bunk without even removing his boots. Nyra sat quietly on the edge of hers, posture rigid despite exhaustion. Karen lay back, one arm draped over her eyes. Bash stood for a moment, staring at his trembling hands. They felt detached, like they belonged to someone else. You should rest, SC murmured. You keep saying that, because you keep ignoring it. He smiled faintly, too tired for words. As he lay back, the low hum of the ship filled the silence again, steady, endless, impersonal. His eyes drifted closed before he could even think of what tomorrow might bring. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like me myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning. and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments! If you would like a better understanding of Bash's origin and family, check out my book Before the Genesis. It tells the story of Kyle and Abby and has some lead up right into this novel. Rundock Chapter 34. The long climb. The lights rose harsh and white, stabbing through the haze of half sleep. Bash didn't move at first. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache. The sensation wasn't sharp pain, just a deep, hollow fatigue that seemed fused to his bones. When he finally sat up, every motion felt delayed, as if the world were pushing back. Across the room, Rixor groaned and rolled over. "If this is what being alive feels like," he muttered, "I vote for something else." Nyra didn't answer. She was sitting perfectly still on her bunk, eyes open, breathing slow. Taren stood near the door, already dressed, though her posture was slouched, exhaustion masquerading as discipline. "Your movements suggesting complete recovery," SC said in Bash's head. "Coordination and strength output will likely remain reduced for several hours." "Great," he murmured aloud. "Clarification," she added. "That assumption extends to everyone. Observation indicates widespread fatigue." He managed a weak smile. "That's the most comforting thing you've said yet." The facility was identical to the first time. The glowing rings, the floating target spheres, the sterile hum. The moment they walked in, the room felt colder. No one spoke. Even the low chatter that usually filled the hall had vanished. When Jouk appeared on the platform, a dozen heads bowed almost instinctively. "Coordination Phase 1, he said. "Repetition. You are expected to maintain or exceed prior metrics." A collective exhale rippled through the ranks, quiet, resigned. Rixor whispered under his breath, "He might as well ask us to fly." Begin. The lights flared to life, and the drills started again. At once Bash realized how bad it was going to be. His limbs were heavy, slow to respond. Every movement dragged. His hands shook just slightly, enough to miss the first 3 pulses. Across the room, one by one, sputters faltered. The air filled with soft chimes of failure tones. By the end of the first sequence, his monitor flashed crimp. "Son, 27%. You are performing below standard," SC noted. "No kidding. Your microtremor frequency suggests muscular instability. Hydration recommended. What I need is a new body." Her tone softened. "Unavailable." He almost laughed. Almost. When the 10th repetition ended, the silence was suffocating. No one looked up. No one asked how they'd done. The numbers above each station spoke for them. Low, red, merciless. Jouk didn't comment. He simply recorded the data and dismissed them. They moved through the food line in silence. The nutrient blocks might as well have been slabs of clay. Rixor sat down heavily. 30%. He said to no one. "That's what they call efficiency." Nyra set her tray down carefully, aligning each piece before she spoke. "We're supposed to improve, not solve." Karen's voice was quiet. "He's measuring how much we can fail before we stop trying." Bash didn't answer. He stared at his reflection in the dull metal of his cup. He looked blank, like someone still moving but no longer present. "You should eat," SC urged. "Energy deficit must be corrected." "I'm not hungry." Irrelevant. He'd ate. They didn't talk. Even Rixor, who usually found something sarcastic to say, just muttered a goodnight and collapsed. Bash lay still, muscles twitching randomly. His mind wanted to think, to analyze, but his body overruled it. "You're quiet," he thought. "Analyzing data variance," SC replied. "All Sparters exhibited equal degradation. This is systemic, not individual. So there's no point being mad at myself." "Correct." He exhaled. "Doesn't help much." It was not meant to. The next morning they faced the physical arena again. The track, the machines, the endless pulsing red line crawling just behind their heels. Jouk's voice echoed from the observation platform. "Coordination Phase 2. Repetition. Minimum expectation. Maintain previous output." The red line brightened. "Begin." They ran, and immediately knew it was worse. Bash's legs felt like soaked sandbags. Rixor tripped on the second lap and nearly took out another Spartan. The weight machines that once offered resistance now felt immovable. Even Nyra, usually the last to break, missed a lift and froze for a full 2 seconds before forcing herself back into rhythm. The red line passed over half the field before the first circuit ended. By the third, even Bash's station flashed yellow. He pushed until his vision blurred, until SC's voice faded into static, until all that existed was breath in the line ahead of him. When the drills finally ended, they were ghosts, silent, trembling, eyes hollow. Scores, low 20s, a few 30s, none higher. Time blurred. The same 2 phases rotated endlessly. Fine motor, gross motor, failure, rest. The only thing that changed was how little it hurt each day. The pain didn't fade. They simply stopped reacting to it. Bash began to recognize patterns. When Jouk's head tilted slightly, the next task would switch. When the drones rose slower, the gravity field had increased fractionally. He learned to anticipate without thinking. Nyra found rhythm again first. Her precision returned little by little. Her perfectionism now tempered by acceptance. Taren adapted through discipline. She counted every breath, every rep, her movements timed to the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Rixor just refused to quit. His technique was a disaster, but he was always moving. By the 8th day, their metrics had stabilized, still low, but no longer fallen. Bash managed a 45% accuracy rating. Nyra hit 49. It wasn't success, but it was something. Your coordination has improved by 8% since yesterday. SC observed one night. Guess you're reading me better. Not entirely. A pause. My predictions still deviate by several points. I am compensating by observation rather than calibration, meaning I'm learning you instead of measuring you. He smiled faintly in the dark. Welcome to the club. By the 10th day, everything changed. Subtly, movements felt smoother. The trembling stopped. When Bash reached for a target sphere, his hand no longer lagged behind his intention. When he ran the track, his strides aligned perfectly with the rhythm of his breath. The red line stayed behind him now, barely, but enough. Jouk said nothing, but Bash noticed the faintest flick of his eyes as he recorded the scores. For the first time, Bash thought he saw acknowledgement, not approval, just recognition. That was enough. Rixor actually laughed after the 10th sequence. We're not dying. Progress. Nyra even smiled, just slightly. 50%. 52, Taren corrected, checking the monitors. Bash looked up at the data wall. He didn't need to ask. Every number was higher. Not great, but higher. The room felt lighter for the first time in days. The physical drills returned. They ran the track again, the red line chasing close. The weight machines hummed. The drone circled overhead. But this time, it felt different. Their movements synced naturally, almost fluid. Rixor and Bash matched strides without meaning to. Nyra's timing on the resistance lifts was exact. Taren called transition softly, her tone steady. By the time the final buzzer sounded, half the room was still standing. Their monitors flashed yellow instead of red. 50% average. Jouk descended from the platform slowly, his gaze sweeping over them. Coordination phases 1 and 2, he said, sufficient for continuation. No one spoke. They just stood there, panting, swaying, alive. Jouk surveyed them in silence, his gaze sweeping over the exhausted but upright Sparters. He said nothing of their scores or performance, only gave a short nod, the faintest acknowledgement of completion. Rest, he said simply. Then he turned and left the arena. The atmosphere afterward was different, still quiet, but not hollow. There was weight behind their silence, the heavy calm of people who had endured and come to the other side. Rixor pushed his tray forward in the cafeteria. Halfway there, he said. Nyra smirked faintly. You can't know that. I can hope, he countered. Bash just nodded, taking another bite. The food didn't taste any better, but at least it didn't feel like defeat anymore. SE spoke softly in his mind. Your performance aligns with early stabilization models. Recovery appears consistent. So we're improving. Temporarily. He frowned. You always know how to kill a mood. Fact don't care about feelings. He almost laughed, shaking his head. They returned to their quarters without words. Rixor collapsed on his bunk but smiled for the first time in days. Nyra stretched silently, her motion smoother now. Taren sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes closed in quiet focus. Bash lay back, staring at the ceiling's faint glow. His muscles still ached, but it was the kind that came from progress. We might actually make it through this, he thought. SC's response came gently. Perhaps. He smiled faintly. You're supposed to say yes. Certainty isn't efficient. Yeah, he whispered, closing his eyes. Tell that to optimism. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments if you would like a better understanding of Bash's origin and family. Check out my book Before the Genesis. It tells the story of Kyle and Abby and has some lead up right into this novel. Rundock Chapter 35, Expedited. The lights rose in slow gradients of gold and white. Bash stirred first, rolling stiff shoulders that no longer screamed in pain but hummed with soreness. It was the kind of ache that meant healing, not breaking. Across the room, Rixor was already upright, stretching. He said, surprised, I can move without swearing. Nyra was sitting on her bunk, fastening her wrist seals. Enjoy it while it lasts. Taren stood by the door, calm and centered. Phase 1 again today? Probably, Vash said, pulling on his suit. Feels like it. They left together, muscles loose but spirits high. The corridor was brighter than usual, and for the first time, their steps carried a rhythm that sounded almost confident. The mood broke the moment they reached the coordination facility. Jouk stood in front of the sealed doors, hands clasped behind him. The hall's low murmur faded to stillness as Spartans trickled in. One by one they formed ranks, 50 on each side of the corridor. He didn't move until the last of them arrived. Novarchs, he began, voice carrying cleanly through the corridor. Until now, your progression has aligned with expectation. My intent was to continue coordination phases 1 and 2 until every Novak achieved a minimum of 80% performance. At that point, we would proceed to coordination phase 3. He paused, but circumstances have changed. A ripple moved through the line, soft whispers, quick glances. The 20th Reincarnate has hatched. Jouk continued. Their cycle has begun. We now have 60 days until the cycle competition. The word hit like a spark in dry air. Conversations erupted instantly, low, sharp, anxious. Cycle competition. The words echoed in Bash's mind before he could stop them. It is the event in which SC began. Voice steady and immediate. Never mind, he cut in. Tell me later. I need tea. I'll focus on Jouk. Acknowledged. He forced his eyes back to the front, pushing the curiosity aside. Jouk's tone never shifted. It stayed calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of command. Jouk's eyes lifted, cold and bright. Silence. The noise died at once. This schedule is 30 days faster than projected, he said. Your timeline has been expedited. Someone near the back exhaled audibly. Due to this change, Jouk went on, we will not delay. Coordination phase 3 begins today. The corridor stayed silent, heavy with disbelief. I am aware of your fatigue, he said, tone changing. You will not relax. The Reincarnates will possess their abilities before the competition begins. For the cycle to qualify for portal access, every Novak must reach a minimum efficiency of 80p. Failure from one is failure for all. He turned toward the doors. They slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Phase 3 begins now. The facility was unrecognizable. It looked like a collision of everything they'd endured. Half arena, half precision hall. The outer track curved around a new central grid of holo stations. Drones hovered in clusters overhead. Weighted rigs and reaction circles gleamed side by side. Numbers 1 through 50, Jouk said. Fine motor stations, 51 through 100, gross motor. You will rotate after each round. Minimum passing, 80% for 3 consecutive sequences. Focus and pace yourselves. He raised a hand toward the upper balconies. Screens flickered to life, displaying 20 columns of tasks, 10 rounds each. Typically, Joe, UK continued. Phase 3 consists of 6 rotations, 20 stations per rotation. Due to our accelerated schedule, that number increases to 10. A few Spartans exchanged glances. One audibly groaned. These days will be longer and harder than any before. Jouk finished. Completion is mandatory. The only acceptable reason for not completing a round is death. The words landed like weights. Again, Bash moved automatically to his assigned station, positioned near the far curve of the arena, the gross motor zone. His first task was simple enough in appearance. A series of narrow balanced platforms that shifted unpredictably with each step, coordination and stability under motion. He stepped onto the first platform. It tilted forward instantly, forcing him to compensate, muscles tight, aiming to keep from slipping. Begin, Jouk commanded. Bash launched into motion. At first, it was manageable, steady breathing, calculated balance. Then the platforms began to move faster, adjusting angles and trajectories mid-step. What had started as a rhythm became chaos. SC's voice entered softly. Center your weight lower. Adjust by instinct, not prediction. Instinct's getting me nowhere. He shot back, leaping for the next platform. Then stop thinking, she replied. He landed hard but upright, exhaling sharply as he stumbled through the final pad. The monitor above the station flashed orange, 58%. Not a fail, but nowhere near passing. Around him, the air filled with grunts, impacts, and the dull hum of the whole systems. The other Spartans were in the same struggle. Motion collapsing into noise, precision breaking under fatigue. By the end of the first round, Bash's balance was shot and his pulse was pounding. He glanced toward Rixor's station across the field. The larger Spartan was gasping, drenched in sweat, still trying to lift a kinetic bar that refused to stabilize. Then Jouk's voice echoed again. Swish! Bash groaned under his breath and headed toward the fine motor section, the world already beginning to blur into light and exhaustion. Jouk's voice cut through the chaos. Maintain control. Hesitation breeds error. He didn't shout. He never shouted, but the words hit harder than any yell. By the end of the second round, monitors across the hall glowed crimson. 20%, 23, 18, their hard-won progress from the privy, whose days vanished in a single morning. Rixor stumbled through the track beside Bash, panting. We're back to zero. Less than zero, Bash said. We had progress. Nyra missed a target and hissed under her breath. My hands won't stop shaking. Taren's calm voice carried over the din. He warned us. Pace, not panic. But the advice barely helped. By the third rotation, the drones introduced random pulses of resistance, air pressure changes that threw off balance mid-motion. Precision collapsed entirely. When Jouk finally called for rest, it wasn't a reprieve. It was a ceasefire. They stood or knelt where they'd stopped, drenched in sweat, chest heaving. The silence was almost reverent in its exhaustion. Bash checked his screen. 29%. Same result as day 3. SE noted quietly, regression to baseline. So 12 days for nothing. Not nothing, she said softly. You learned endurance. He barked a tired laugh. You should try it sometime. The cafeteria that evening was subdued again. Hope scraped raw. Utensils clinked softly against trays. Conversation stayed brief. Rixor stared at his food without touching it. 20%. That's impressive consistency. Nyra gave a quiet scoff. If we go any lower, we'll have to invent new math. Taren stirred her drink, watching the surface ripple. He said 60 days. That's not long. Not long enough, Rixor muttered. Bash didn't speak. He felt the weight settling again, the dull return of defeat. You should eat, SE said. Later. You said that yesterday. Then call it a pattern. She paused. You are unsettled. Because I don't know what this phase is supposed to do. It combines neural and muscular calibration under alternating stress. The goal is harmony. He smirked weakly. Feels more like demolition. Sometimes one precedes the other. He sighed and finally took a bite. The food was tasteless, but at least it kept his hands busy. They returned to the dorm long after lights out protocol. No one spoke on the walk back. The corridor lighting dimmed around them like a closing hand. Inside, the air was cool and still. Rixor sat on the floor instead of his bunk, staring at his palms as though they didn't belong to him. They keep shaking, he said. Even now. Nyra flexed her fingers silently, confirming the same. Taren leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. It's the transition delay. Our nerves can't decide which phase they are in. Jouk can't expect us to hit 80% like this, Rixor muttered. He does, Bash said quietly. They all looked at him. He always does. The room fell silent again as they all fell into their beds. What's the cycle competition? Bash asked once the others had gone still. SE hesitated. Now is not the time. Tell me anyway. After rest, you'll just say you're recalibrating again. A pause. Then, very well. Bash rolled onto his back, staring at the faint light strip along the ceiling. Go ahead. It is the proving event between all 100 Novarchs and the 20 Reincarnates of the single cycle. 120 combats. One-on-one, he murmured. Yes. Bracketed elimination. 128 positions. 8 buys are granted to select Reincarnates during the opening round. He frowned slightly. Figures. Even in this place, they get head starts. Statistically justified, SE replied. Their performance metrics exceed standard calibration. Yeah, he muttered. That's one way to say it. Defeat equals removal from the primary bracket, she continued. However, the 8 who lose in the round of 16 compete again for the final 2 positions in the top 10, so they fight again. Bash said quietly. For scraps. For recognition. The top 10 receive rewards, equipment of Tier 3 common classification, weapons or armor. The highest finisher chooses first. He exhaled through his nose. Sounds familiar. Different world, same systems. Pattern repetition is a nexus constant. Guess so. He turned his head slightly toward the O. There's bunks. The faint rhythm of breathing filling the silence. Do we get any form of armor? Fitted resonance suits. When a participant's resonance drops below 10%, the containment field activates to prevent fatal injury. So they can't actually die. Not by intent. Bash stared at the ceiling a moment longer. Who usually wins? Historically, Reincarnates dominate the top rankings. A few green Novarchs have placed among them. Only one blue reached the top 10. The record of that event is sealed. Sealed, he echoed. By who? Unknown. Data redacted from central archives. Jouk may have access. Bash sighed. Of course he would. Statistical projection. With an accelerated schedule, the cycle's probability of Nova top 10 placement decreases by 34%. Good-o, DDS, he muttered dryly. There remains the possibility of variance, she said softly, and of anomaly. He almost smiled at that. You mean luck. Luck is simply unmodeled cause. He gave a faint chuckle, exhaustion creeping in, but not enough to dull his focus. You're learning sarcasm faster than you admit. Observation breeds adaptation. Then keep observing, he murmured. We're going to need it. Thank you for reading this chapter. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving a thumbs up, leaving a positive review or a comment. It truly helps a debut author like myself. As this is my first novel, I am still learning, and I would love to hear your constructive feedback to help me improve. I'll do my best to reply to your comments exclamation if you would like a better understanding of Bash's origin and family. Check out my book Before the Genesis. It tells the story of Kyle and Abby and has some lead up right into this novel. Brenda.